Hello everybody, Infinite Shinjo here, and welcome to a series of videos where I'm going to try something a bit different. For anybody that was around finishing up last season of anime, what I ended up doing is just talking about all the anime that I watched in an episode of my Let's Talk Anime series. But for today, I'm going to try something a little bit off the cuff, in a way. Instead of talking about every single anime that I watched from this season and barely giving any time to talk about each one of them, I figure I'm going to make episodes dedicated to each one of the series that I watched from this year. Of course, one of them, Kimetsu no Yaiba, is going to be out much later because it's continuing into the summer season. But at the time of recording this, only two series that I watched from this year are actually done yet. So I'll get my thoughts out on them, edit them, post them whenever I get a chance, and work on the other ones at a later time. Because at this point, shows like Bokuben and One Punch Man Season 2 are not done yet, so I can't really give my full thoughts on them because they're not finished yet. But for the first video in this series where I talk about the anime that I watched from this past season, I'll start with the show that, outside of Kimetsu no Yaiba, became one of my favorites from this season, and that is Hitori Bocchi no Marumaru Seikatsu. I hope I pronounced that right. I'm not exactly sure what it translates to English because every single translation I'm seeing is involving the infinity symbol, so I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. My only close translation of it is Hitori Bocchi's lifestyle of being alone or something to that effect. But for this video and every subsequent video in this series, I'm going to take a little page out of Saber Spark's book and kind of go over it the way that he describes it, involving a separate section for story, characters, stuff like that, just to make it a little more organized for you viewers and a lot more organized for myself recording it. So first, before I get into it, I feel like it just makes sense for me to describe what the show is about. Hitori Bocchi is a comedy slice of life revolving around a character called Bocchi Hitori, who suffers from social anxiety. She can't really talk that well to other people, and when she gets to middle school, her only friend, Kai Yawara, is attending a different school, and she tells Bocchi she's breaking off their friendship and basically forces her to make friends with every single person in her class. And then after that, then Kai will become friends with her again. And the whole show is essentially Bocchi trying to befriend people in the class. Now, one red flag that I can see just from reading that synopsis, of course I'm roughly paraphrasing it from what I've seen, but the one red flag that I can understand is that it might seem like this show is kind of poking fun at social anxiety in a way, but it really isn't, at least for me, because I'm not a person that has had super bad social anxiety, not in Bocchi's case, but I've always been kind of a backwards person. It's been kind of hard for me to talk to people sometimes, so I can relate to that part, but just the fact that it's so extreme, which I'll get into later, just makes it a lot more comical. And of course, then comes the point of, well, let's take Bocchi's class having 20, maybe 30 people, something like that. It's gonna be impossible in a 12, 13 episode runtime for her to make friends with every single person in the class, which at that point, they more or less have to rely on viewers liking the show and hopefully getting greenlit for another season, which they really don't do here. I've seen shows that essentially just end in a weird sort of way where they're hoping for another season that never comes, but at the same time with this show, they don't really leave it open-ended at the end. They kind of do because Bocchi doesn't make friends with everybody in the class, but at the same time, she makes enough friends that you can see her growth from episode 1 to episode 12. And on the subject of Bocchi's friends, let's get into the characters. Now, before I get into the characters, I didn't really know about this. I'm on the Wikipedia site, which not really the best, most reliable source, but this is the closest thing I have to give me all the information that I need. Apparently, everybody in the show, their full name essentially translates to what their basic personality trait is in the show. But I'll get into the name translations after I go over each character. So Bocchi Hitori, I essentially went over her already. She has social anxiety, but like I said, they portray it in the most bizarre way possible, that whenever she's put in a situation that makes her uncomfortable, she literally throws up. They don't show it on screen, but it's basically implied from voice acting, sound effects, reactions, that she throws up. Now, of course, that might be something that is a normal occurrence, but just the fact that it's a cartoon and they can just push it up as far as they can put it. Like, Bocchi even gets leg cramps when she's trying to walk and she's trying to talk to somebody. But fortunately for Bocchi, she makes her first friend in Nako Tsunoa. I'm probably butchering all these names, but I don't care. Basically, Nako is the first friend that Bocchi makes, and at first she might be kind of hard to talk to just from how she looks, but she's honestly just kind and supportive, especially of Bocchi, which is shown throughout the show. And there's also this running gag that the teacher thinks that Nako is bad news because apparently she looks like a thug or something like that, which is actually a common occurrence with the anime that I watched this year. But to spin it another way, Nako is basically the conscience of the group, which you'll definitely see as I go through the rest of these characters. Next up is Aru Hansho, the vice representative of the class, who tries to put on more or less a facade for the class to make them think that she has everything together and she's all perfect, but she's basically a loser, or as the show describes it, unfortunate. And finally, from Bocchi's main friends is Sotka Lucky Thar? I don't know exactly how to pronounce that. Sotka is another one of Bocchi's classmates who comes from another country, and I kid you not, she believes that she's a ninja. And I actually forgot about this one. Another one of Bocchi's friends that she makes late in the show is Mayo Ojosa, who is Bocchi's most recent friend that she makes, more or less, who essentially her personality boils down to she comes from a rich family. So you get all the usual traits of, oh, she's rich, so she doesn't know what this simple thing is. Now, of course, there are other characters in the show, much like Bocchi's other classmates. She actually makes two other friends that aren't really part of the main cast. And of course, Kai, like I mentioned earlier. And there's also another character called Kako Kurai, who's the morals officer, public morals officer of the class. And she has a policy against making friends, and she wants to be strong enough to live by herself. But a lot of the other characters aren't really important for this video. But like I mentioned earlier, all the characters' name translations basically boil down to their main trait in the show. Hitori Bocchi means all alone, Tsunao Nako means honest child, Hansho Aru means having a hidden nature, and Soto Karakita means came from outside. So you can imagine that with a main cast of a girl with social anxiety, a tough looking girl with a heart of gold, an unfortunate loser, and a ninja, you can imagine that they would have some adventures. And well, you're kind of right. For some people, the premise of making friends isn't really going to be something that pulls people in to watch the show. But at the same time, like I mentioned earlier, it's cool seeing Bocchi go from a shy girl to actually talking with her friends like normal by the end of the show. Now, I did mention that it was a comedy, although admittedly a lot of the comedic moments all just boiled down to awkward moments. Like essentially every single comedic moment in the show is Bocchi talking with one of her friends, and then another one of her friends comes in, and Bocchi repeats something out of context, and they're just looking at Bocchi like, what did you just say? What are you talking about? Although, to be fair, based off of a show that involves social anxiety and making friends, it's not really too much of a stretch to say that that's where all the comedic moments lie. But at least for me, I like the comedy just because it's kind of on that level of Asobi Asobase, where the joke just hits you out of left field and you don't really expect it. Although my comedic tastes don't really speak for everybody. And at the same time, the premise of abandoning your best friend, forcing her to make friends in her middle school, is definitely a weird concept in itself. But the way I interpret it, which I don't know if they really explain it in depth, but the main reason that Kai abandons Bocchi and forces her to make friends with her classmates is for her to get used to talking to people. I'm not sure if she really outright states that, but that's how I interpret it. Especially since Bocchi and Kai meet up halfway in the show, and it's pretty clear that Kai's not doing this out of malice. But at the end of the day, it's a heartwarming show, especially about making friends and you flashing back to when you made friends in middle and high school. So, at that front, it does its job very well. And as far as a score for Hitori Bocchi, I would give it 7 out of 10. I wouldn't say that it will be something that I would go back and watch over a second time, but it's something that's at least good enough for me that I would recommend it to people if they enjoy slice of life. And at the same time, there is this very, very good fluid animation used in the opening when Aru is dancing along and singing. That part is just very, very cool. But those are my thoughts on Hitori Bocchi no Marumaru Seikatsu. I hope that you enjoyed. I hope it's not too out there and going from one extreme to another when explaining these stuff. I know I'm going to have to cut down the audio for this, but I got time. But if you enjoyed, make sure to hit that like button. And if you've watched this show, let me know what you think about it. If you haven't watched this show, let me know if you're going to watch this show. But that is going to be it for this video. I'm going to record another video, and it's going to be a very adorable one. Momentai.